Yeah, so this will be our second design school update. And I have a feeling that these design school updates are going to be really important because all of you will be so confused about how many changes we're making all the time if we don't have a way of just summarizing them. Because you probably noticed that we take emergent prototyping processes very, very seriously. And so welcome, Brad. You guys are just in time. I'm about to start the presentation. And Brad's autopilot's here ready to roll. And here comes Chris. Sweet. Well, today, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to give like a sweeping overview of the changes in the last 2 weeks. And what you'll see is that really, I want all of you to send huge hugs to Penny because everything that's happening involves changes that she has to implement in 2 ways: in redesigning and restructuring the whole Mighty Networks platform over and over and over again, and then managing all of the human relationships that are associated with that. So I think she's been talking with a lot of you one-on-one about how and whether you might like to participate in some of these changes. So just know that Penny looks so calm and relaxed, probably because she's tired. But anyway, we'll get to that. Let me go ahead and start the screen share so that we can get into the presentation. So today, updates for July 11th. I'm going to basically categorize or summarize the whole talk in 4 themes. That we're evolving the digital platform. There are a lot of happenings in the design school, so I'll just give you a little flavor of what's happening. We'll talk about some new capacities and clarity of our strategic focus for the design school overall, and how we are very intentionally creating structures that can bring greater coherence as we increase in complexity. And so, said another way, there's just a lot happening in the design school. And so let's spend a little time, a few minutes, just making sense of it together. So the big news is immediately after the design school update 2 weeks ago, we received word that Benji, Penny, and I are getting 2 years of funding to support the 3 of us to cover travel expenses, living expenses. Jonathan has already been helping us to set up all of the relationships with the foundation for Possible Planet to receive the funding on our behalf. We are scheduled to receive the funding in the beginning of August, so about a month from now. And we're already like rolling out a lot of changes in anticipation for what we'll be doing. And basically what's going to happen with this funding is that we have a really clear strategic focus. Our focus, now that the 3 of us are funded, is to support landscape leaders, which is pretty much like all of you on this call and several others who aren't here today. And so what we realized in our discussion as a team, when Penny, Benji, and I came together and said, how are we going to spend this money? And we're going to have $150,000 in the first year. We could burn through that pretty quickly if we're not thoughtful about it. And so we wanted to get really clear on our focus. And we realized that our focus should be to help our landscape leaders to get funded, as well as to bring them whatever other kinds of supports they may need, including social and emotional support, collaborative learning environments, and all kinds of things. And so this means that a big focus for us is to create collaborative funding ecosystems. I'll talk a little bit more about that today, but I really think you'll see more of it in practice in the coming weeks and months. So now that we're funded, we're basically a commons for all of you. And so our job now is to create resource-rich and supportive environments for all of our work across our different landscapes. And so one of the ways of thinking about this is, you might notice I cleverly put an image of a neuron with synapses that we can basically start to think of the bioregions and the landscapes in our networks. So you can think of the greater Takaranto bioregion, the Roaring Fork Valley, et cetera, that all of these are nodes of intelligence that we want to create, where we want to create learning exchanges, coordination, knowledge, capacity, tools, structures, financial flows that move into and between the landscapes as a major focus of the design school in the next year. And so another way of saying this is that we have a new focus on deeper community engagements. Not that we didn't want to focus on deeper community engagements before, it's that we didn't have the capacity. So as an example, if we wanted to go to Maine and spend time with Roberta and her team and deepen our relationships and find ways to be more helpful, it would sure be helpful if we could afford to buy airline tickets. And now we can. And so this focus on deeper community engagements means that we plan to spend about, for Penny and me at least, to spend half of our time in Barichara in the next year and half of our time in other landscapes connected with the design school. Said another way is that we're going to travel within and support the Great Lakes, the Colorado River Basin, and Cascadia as major organizing focus areas, and then move out into the other emerging landscapes, like in Western Maine, or if things emerge within the Great Plains or with the Ogallala Aquifer. There's some other interesting possibilities in California, like in the Klamath Valley, where Jonathan Cabot, who joined the design school but hasn't been active yet, but he's very active in his bioregion in Northern California. We may find some other landscapes start to come into focus, but we're really making a major effort around creating collaborative funding ecosystems in these three regions. And so that means that as a team, we can be called upon by members of the design school to come and do strategy sessions, to build relationships with funders, to do pre-activation preparations, to do activation tours, to do post-activation further progress and further capacities. All of these are now fully available to us because of this funding. And Benji is like all about the Colorado Basin. And so he's mobile and engaged. He's actually been looking for a car to buy, and as the money comes in, he's going to buy a car. He's planning to relocate to Paonia. He already has found a place to stay. And so as soon as he buys a car, he's moving from Denver to Paonia. And then he's open to travel, which just means anyone within the Colorado Basin can just call up Benji and say, yo, Benji, I'd love to organize something in Grand Junction. Could you come and help us out in Cortez? Could we bring some people to Mexicali? And Benji is ready and rearing to go to figure out the most strategic ways to do all of those things. And so this money that's come in to support the three of us means that we have much more capacity to support all of you. And we're taking this very, very seriously, especially for those of you who saw my talk over the weekend about tipping points of the Earth system. The clock is ticking and we don't have a lot of time. So we are in full activation mode ourselves. One of the focal points that I'm going to personally take on and hold really seriously is how to weave the coherence of what we're doing with other potential partners that we haven't engaged with yet, and to create collaborative funding ecosystems. And let me just speak a little bit about this. Yesterday, I met with this wonderful guy named Peter Tavernice, who works at the Cisco Foundation, which is the corporate foundation of the Cisco Corporation. And last year, he was able to get the board of trustees and their donors to allocate $100 million into a climate action fund, where half of the money would go to offering grants to climate solutions that are systemic in nature, and half of the money would be to create startup business ecosystems. And so when I'm talking to someone like Peter, who is helping to guide the deployment of $100 million, I would really love to bring him into relationships with people like local foundations in Vancouver Island or in Seattle or in Chicago or in Toronto. And so when we talk about creating collaborative funding ecosystems, it means that I'm going to have this high-level objective of forming relationships with multiple kinds of wealth managers, and to collaborate with people like Eduardo, who's already doing this, and with others to create regional impact funds for these large-scale regions that we're focusing on, and for all of our landscapes. And when I talk about weaving for coherence, I'm talking about things like how I've already been proactively reaching out to Regenerative Communities Network, to R3.0. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with the executive director of Buckminster Fuller Institute. I'm soon going to start reaching out to others that I know and trying to build and weave coherence across the regenerative movement as someone who has a sort of surprisingly diverse network. No one really knows how diverse my network is because it's mostly invisible, but I know a lot of people. And because I'm a small level figure, I'm not famous and big, I can sort of work behind the scenes to help weave greater coherence across the regenerative movement, including by creating collaborative funding ecosystems. So I'll be talking to groups like EcoTrust and Salmon Nation and on and on and on. I'll be playing this role, which means that if you have funders that are interested in funding your landscape and you would like help in organizing them with other funders, that's going to be a role I'll be taking on in the next year to try and help us bring capacity to all of the landscapes in our networks. So that's going to be a really big part of taking this whole effort up a level. And now this is something that maybe you are all already feeling, which is that the design school is growing so quickly, has so many diverse activities, that it's actually becoming incoherent with itself. And so our solution to this, as Penny and Benji and I were watching Brandon running ahead on digital ecosystems, and Claire forming relationships with the local foundation, and Susan and Brian building out a tapestry of very politically sensitive relationships in the greater Toronto area. And we're starting to see that the movements are not coherent simply because we don't have a container that can hold the coherence of the ecosystem that's arising. And so our solution to that is to create a design school leadership council. And I want to remind everyone that we have 2 levels of membership right now. There are community level members, depicted in green here, and design level members, which are depicted in blue. And we've already said, when we created the community level membership, that design level members would be able to participate in the governance of the Design School Fund, and that they would be able to lead a bioregional activation, and that they would get to participate in governance of the school overall, but we've been very vague about what that meant. So now we can start to get more clear, which is that from the pool of design level members, there's an eligibility to join the Leadership Council. So we're going to form a Leadership Council starting this week, pulling from the leadership that exists within the design level membership. And it works like this. The design level or the Leadership Council will provide strategic guidance and direction to the school overall. So this means that Penny, Benji, and I will look to this group of leaders to help shape how we go after funding, to help shape how we continue evolving the Mighty Networks platform, to shape how we talk about what a bioregion is, to shape how we do mapping from one area to another, how we build and replicate tools. How do we do pre-activation supports and post-activation developments in a coherent way, which will just get increasingly complex. Also, the Leadership Council will bring coordination and coherence to the school as a whole, because the leadership of the school, which is, as you'll see later in this talk, it's already decentralized, because I'm going to show you examples of ways that various people are already leading. And so it's no longer Penny, Benji, and me that are leading the school. There's a lot of leadership already happening. And we need a council that can coordinate all of that leadership and hold coherence around it. The Leadership Council will be, the members of this council are going to be community leaders in landscapes of the design school, which means if you're a community leader in your landscape, chances are good we're about to invite you to this council. So you may already have a sense of who you are. And we've created a first round of criteria for Leadership Council membership that we'll be sharing with those people. And the reason we're not sharing it with everyone is that we want to incubate this governance with the people who are closest to what's happening on the ground, to be sure that the design school overall is deeply resonant with what's happening in the landscapes, and it honors and respects the autonomy of those landscapes as the school moves forward. And the Leadership Council is able to form special governance committees, for example, to manage the Design School Fund, which I'll talk about in a moment. So one of the first tasks of the Leadership Council will be to set up a special committee for the Design School Fund so that we can start allocating funding from the Design School Fund to projects of the Design School membership. And the Leadership Council will determine the policies for the council to manage its own affairs. So for example, the Leadership Council, after we've constituted it with its founding members, those members can then determine what are the criteria for a design level member to be eligible to apply to join the Leadership Council? What is the decision-making process? How do we remove someone from the Leadership Council, either because they choose to leave or because we need to kick them out? All of these governing policies will need to be determined by the first council. So we're selectively forming what we think will be a very powerful Leadership Council with community leaders in the landscapes of the design school. And then they will be asked to create their own governing policies for the Leadership Council. And they will be asked to set up a special committee for managing the design school fund so that we can have coherence and participation and collective intelligence. You know, I think Penny, Benji, and I are pretty smart. We'll come up with some pretty good ideas, but it won't be nearly as good as what we can do collaboratively with a kind of representation from the landscapes themselves. And as the number of landscapes grows, we want this Leadership Council to be a really robust governing container for guiding the direction of the design school, which is why we're very mindfully taking all of these steps. So that brings us to the Design School Fund. The Leadership Council will set up a model of participatory governance that will then be available to all design level members. So it's not going to be that the Design School Fund is limited to the Leadership Council. It's that the Leadership Council will set up the framework for design level members to participate in the Design School Fund. And just as a reminder, especially now that Penny, Benji, and I are funded, that the membership dues of the design school, they cover the operating costs of the school. So they'll pay for things like our Zoom account, our Mighty Network subscription. Up until now, they've been helping to pay for our travel, for activations, and they've been supplementing our living expenses for Penny, Benji, and me. As we move forward and as we grow the membership dues, those operating costs will remain the same. And Penny and Benji and I will not need to draw any resources from the Design School Fund for our own livelihoods because we have funding for that, which means the Design School Fund can fund design labs. It can expand the school in ways that are envisioned by design level members by creating partnerships or new ideas or new approaches or new tools. It can do all kinds of things. It can support landscape activations. As an example of that, we are currently talking about using a little bit of design school funding to pay for an airline ticket for a member of the community in Paonia to go to Mexicali and work with Indigenous leaders there to form a top and bottom of the basin relationship, which would enhance the landscape activations for both places and for the basin as a whole. So these kinds of things that the Design School Fund can do. New capacities will emerge. Like Eduardo sent me a message this morning asking if they recruited members of the Mexicali community. Could we earmark money from the Design School Fund to go to Mexicali? And I said, I don't want to make that decision, but the governance of the fund could make that decision. That's a new capacity that doesn't exist for the school right now. And then also the Design School Fund can incubate projects at any level. Right now, the Design School Fund is supporting Gwen in Carbondale to do work weaving the community around a food shed alliance. And so it's incubating a project she has in her landscape. And so we're already learning a little bit about how the Design School Fund can work, but what we didn't have until now is a decision-making framework in which to set up its governance. The Leadership Council will provide that framework. So as soon as we establish the Leadership Council can quickly get to work on creating a work group or a committee to figure out how the governance should work for the Design School Fund. And that committee can make recommendations back to the Leadership Council to approve how that governance is set up for participation with all design level members. And that's something that will roll out as we move forward. So we're really excited about all of these things. I think you can see that the design school is evolving rapidly, and thus it needs much more structure for it to continue growing in complexity. And about a month ago, we started inviting community level members, and we have a lot of new community level members. We have new people joining every day. As of right now, we have 105 members of the school. About 40 of them are community level members. Just for a comparison, a month ago, we had 73 design level members, but that was everyone in the school. Some design level members have left as design level members and re-entered at the lower cost community level membership because they didn't really feel like they wanted to be quite as engaged, and that we're perfectly comfortable with that. But now that we have a growing number, nearly half, 40 of 105 is nearly half of the membership, and we anticipate that the community level membership will grow, we need to evolve the platform so that we can make it easier for those of you who are community organizers. So if you're organizing your own community, your own bioregion or landscape, you might want to invite community members from your landscape to join the design school. So Penny has been working really hard to evolve the platform. She's not done, by the way. She has a lot more work to do to make it easier for community organizers in the design school to organize in service to their local on-the-ground members. So that you could basically say, you know, here we are in the greater Toronto area. We want to invite people from our region to join the design school and give them a space in which we can organize them specific to that region, to that geography, which is a different space in the design school from the Roaring Fork Valley, or from Cascadia, or from Victoria, or the Cowichan Valley in Vancouver Island, and so on and so forth. And so Penny has been working very hard on this. I think she's banged her head against the wall a few times on ontologies and categorization, but we've come up with a pretty good next step. I'm sure it's not perfect, and I'm sure we'll make it better. But basically what we want to do is we want to make it easier for you to welcome your friends into the design school at the level of $5 a month. And you would know where you could send people. And if you wanted to lead within the design school, you could organize spaces and capacities for them. And we see this as a powerful way that the design school will grow organically by word of mouth and referrals, the way that we talked about before. So Penny has been working really hard. She's been overhauling the whole orientation area. So when a new member joins, they have to go through orientation to learn how to use the platform. She's changed most of that content and she's reorganized it. She's moved things from other sections into the home feed. She's done a lot of things to bring coherence to the new structures that we're creating. And in brief, there are really 3 areas she's been working. A new orientation area for new members, an improved home area, which is the place that everyone in the school sees, design members and community members. And she's changed the fractal structure, the nested structure of the platform, to be better organized around landscapes in a way that would make sense to community leaders and their community members. The way this works is actually very intuitive. We're organizing by landscapes, but we're working in a fractal way. So previously, there was this thing called the Bioregional Activation Center. Penny has gotten rid of this.
I will.
Or rather, she will when she's finished making the changes this week. And she's moved the bioregion supports. She's changed them and called them bioregional learning exchanges and put them in the home section. And then all of these other regions, which are mixed in definition. Cascadia is a bioregion, but is it a region? Colorado River Basin is a region, but is it a bioregion? That's a bit confusing right now. We won't fully resolve the philosophy of that, but we'll at least make it easier to organize. And so what she's going to do is create entire sections of the platform where, just like the Bioregional Activation Center can have sections underneath it, these are called collections and spaces in the Mighty Networks terminology. You don't need to worry yourself about that. The only thing you need to know is that the only level at which you can host events and have a news feed and send messages to members is at the level that is listed here on the left as bioregion supports Acadian Northern Forest, Cascadia, etc. And so what we're doing is creating entirely new sections, one that is a section for the Great Lakes, a section for the Colorado River Basin, a section for Cascadia, and within each of them, for example, within the Great Lakes, there will be subcategories like the Greater Takaranto Bioregion, the Genesee River Finger Lakes, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, whichever groups form. If something forms in Michigan, it would be there as well. And each of those spaces will be able to have its own events, its own news feed, its own resources, so that if you are an organizer for that landscape level, that you can actually have all of that structure available to your members. For the Colorado Basin, for example, there might be a section, an area for the Roaring Fork that has a news feed and resources and events, and a different space that has those same capacities for everyone in Paonia. So if you are an organizer in Paonia and you invite people to join the design school, you might also invite them to join the Paonia section within the Colorado River Basin so that you can organize together with them in a focused way. Now, the main reason Penny had to do this reorganization is that Mighty Networks only allows 2 levels of nested organizing. And so she restructured the categories to allow this to happen. And this creates a structure for leaders, community leaders, to host their own content. So if you're in Mexicali, you could host the entire Mexicali section in Spanish, for example. And this makes it a lot more natural for the design school to grow and for members of local communities to feel comfortable inviting their friends or people they collaborate with to join the school at the $5 per month level, and then to join this area where they're organizing locally. And that we feel this is going to create a lot of value in the future. In addition to this, as we're creating these nested structures for coherence, we're also going to create a new section that's similar to the section of, say, the Great Lakes or the section of what used to be bioregional activation supports. We're going to create a section called Design School Operations and Governance, which is where members of the Leadership Council will be invited to join. It'll be a private section where the Leadership Council will be able to engage in governance decisions, including how they set up and govern the Design School Fund in service to the memberships. And within the Design Lab Center, Penny has been working to create an area called the Pre-Activation Supports Design Lab, which is where we're basically merging several ideas for design labs that came before to make them more coherent with each other, to have a coordinated space for multiple work groups that can create things like digital infrastructure, media toolkits, media materials for organizing around an activation tour, how to set up websites, all kinds of things that people are working on in the design school right now will be within this Pre-Activation Supports Design Lab. And that's going to be in the Design Lab Center. So we're creating all these changes so that the governance and the organizing and the action are more coherent for all of the members of the design school, for community members, for design members, for design leaders, for the Design School Leadership Council, for the Design School Fund, for different kinds of labs and work groups. We need coherence for all of this complexity. And to help us manage how we do all of this work, something Penny has talked about before, and she's partnered with Lena, who is also in the design school, within the Culture and Connections Center, which is an area that exists in the design school right now, but so far hasn't been very active. She's about to open up an area called the Inner Space. And this is a space for explorations of how we regenerate our own inner capacities as human beings to become regenerators of the earth. She's about to make this public this week. And the first event will be July 18th. So Penny and Lena, I said there's already distributed leadership. Here's an example where Penny and Lena have already been designing this space together and are preparing to roll it out, which Penny's really excited about. But also, Brandon has already been taking leadership. He's already been leading bioregional mapping, and he's about to start hosting a work group for a grant writing work group for people who want to do fundraising together or who just want help with fundraising for their own landscapes. So Brandon of the Cascadia Department of Bioregions is going to be hosting a grant writing work group that anyone in the school, community level or design level, can join and learn how to write grants, help write grants, support each other with their grant writing success stories and their failures to get better at mobilizing resources into our landscapes. And we're really glad that Brandon's going to be doing that. And as all of this is happening, the work of the design school continues. Benji has been hosting community dialogues about Story of Place and posting the recordings in the Colorado River Basin area. And so the Colorado River Basin is weaving itself through all of those activities. All of you who are in that geography of the Colorado River Basin are probably already involved, or if you're not, you can go get involved. And as Penny opens up these different spaces for the major regions, you can join the Colorado River Basin to get involved. And there will be a lot more reporting and sharing that's already happening that will continue to unfold through that part of the design school. Also, we're about to ramp up big time into our next major activation tour, which takes place in October, the Regenerate Cascadia Tour. This is some content from the website that Brandon has been creating, collaborating with Claire and with Megan and with us, that they're preparing for a big bioregional activation tour and following it with a Cascadia Bioregional Summit. So they're role modeling structures and activities for how other regions can organize themselves. Like, for example, the Great Lakes is already learning a lot from Regenerate Cascadia and what they're planning to do. Even though they haven't even done it yet, the ideas are being replicated to the Great Lakes. And you better be sure Benji, as he's holding the organizing of the Colorado River Basin, is also learning these lessons from Regenerate Cascadia and is bringing the learnings from the Colorado River Basin to Cascadia and to the Great Lakes. And more of these exchanges are going to occur in the future. So we're just about to jump into this with both feet. So as I said at the beginning, there's a lot happening in the design school. And so these happenings of the design school keep unfolding. There are new capacities and a new strategic focus. We're creating structures for coherence of the school as a whole. And that means we're doing a lot of work to evolve the digital platform to accommodate what's happening. And so I'd love to just open it up to questions or comments, or just joyful expressions of love and appreciation, like the way I feel in this picture. Let's talk about all of this, shall we? So that's my little update.
Oh, no, baby.
That's what's been happening in the last 2 weeks. I'm really curious what we'll say 2 weeks from now. But yeah, let's open up to questions and comments. Brad, please.
Hey, look, Joe, I just got involved with this so I'd spend less time on Facebook. Like I didn't want this to change my whole life, but I am welcoming it, and thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I have a feeling we might have I think Benji might have lit a fire under your butt in that last Colorado Basin call. When I watched the recording, I was like, and Brad's gonna go out into his community and organize everyone. Did Brad know he's doing that?
Yeah, but and very clear, like like I said with Penny, like I don't want to overcommit because of the things that I have going on, and money. I'm, as most of you don't know, I'm independently wealthy, and no, but money doesn't matter. It's more just other responsibilities. So letting it kind of organically come in, and I appreciate your kind of understanding about that.
Well, in my screen, Chris is right below you holding his little baby. And I'm like, if we're not thinking of the little babies, what are we doing? And I know you got some kids you take care of. So heck yeah, man, I get it. Does anyone else have any questions? I know I was sort of a whirlwind tour again in this session. Anyone have questions they'd like further clarification about? Or comments as well. Grace. Hi, Grace, by the way. Nice to see you.
Yeah, hi. Been just crazy busy writing biodiversity methodologies. So as you can imagine, I've been a little bit less active here. What will happen to the other topics, right? So right now, there's two things happening with my topic around economics. But first I wanted to hear from you what you're in, like what's going on, and then maybe I'll update what's been going on with us.
Yeah, I'd love to invite an update. So far, we don't really see two sections that are there right now. There's the Live Learning Center and the Self-Guided Learning Journeys. We don't really see those changing at the moment. And since what you've been hosting has been in the Live Learning Center and the themed dialogues up until now, that I see that just continuing, that members of the design school at the design level can host themed dialogues and can offer things to the rest of the school. So I just see that continuing. And while that's been a bit less of our focus lately, and yeah, I've been giving I've been giving some webinars on the Earth systems, but so there's some activity there, but we're really emphasizing that the school is on the ground in the landscapes more than it's online, as just a point of philosophy. And then these learning exchanges online are in support to that. And I think that'll become more interesting as we're exploring ways to possibly bring coherence back to how we might partner with Earth Regenerators. And there might be other spaces that open this even further into how learning exchanges happen online. But that's to be determined by the leadership of Earth Regenerators and where we go with that. So I think the spaces that you've been holding with generously giving into the community will have more opportunities for stimulating synergies, is maybe the way I would say it at this point. But we're not making any changes to those areas of the school right now.
Yeah, maybe I want to talk to you about that a little more extensively, because what's happened is I've finished cohort 13 of my formal workshop, and I wanted to evolve into a weekly call. And I have a curriculum that people can follow along and then come to the weekly call with whatever topic they have. They might be on week 1 and somebody else might be on week 6, and that's all fine. And I was thinking that it might be appropriate to bring it in here.
Yeah.
And then they can join at one of the membership levels that makes sense for them for a 6 weeks journey, and then participate. And that would feed people into this bigger thing, because I don't really have the interest of hosting it. And I think that there's relevance both from the curriculum level and then on this ongoing, like having a place to talk about, like even if it's just like this week, we're going to have something going on in our region, and I wanted to come in and check in with the community, something like that. So I don't know who to talk to about that, but maybe, like right now I'm a little bit swamped until the fall. Okay. And so Penny and I, maybe we'll just, when it feels right for you, let's have that conversation.
Yeah.
And see how I move my group of, I've got 100 people who are graduates, into something like that. Not all of them will want to come, but yeah.
Great. Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, I would say there is a pattern emerging right now. And this is one of the reasons I mentioned weaving coherence, is that some of the people we're partnering with, like Brandon, he's got an organization, the Cascadia Department of Bioregion. And we're talking about how what we're doing is so similar to what they're doing that we should integrate our organizations in some way. And then Eduardo was saying something similar this morning. And what I'm feeling is that that pattern of integration, which is a version of what you're saying, is what we all need to proactively hold coherence around, because there's such need for it. So thank you for bringing this up. It's perfect timing. And I feel like you could reach out to Penny at any time about this to start exploring how to do it, because I don't think it would create very much work for her. It would just, at least not in the moment.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, thank you for that. I think that's beautiful. Anything else, Grace, or is that good?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be going to the Eco Village, the European Eco Village event tomorrow, so that's going to be going for 4 or 5 days. So it's just really great timing to be talking about everything that's happening here. Thank you.
That's great to see you. Mitty, welcome.
Thanks. I wonder, maybe it's premature, but I'd love to hear a little bit more from Penny about the space that you're going to be announcing this week. As you know, I've had this sort of on the back burner process of offering pay it forward sessions for gene keys and human design and those kinds of processes of, get to know yourself. And I'd love to offer that as a resource within the school if you think this might fit. And very specifically, what time is the meeting on the 18th? Because I'd love to be available if I can. It's a busy day for me already. Do you know the day, the time?
Yeah, it's going to be 10:30 Central. So I think that's 8:30 your time.
Okay.
And it's going to be just this first meeting will be like an opening circle, because what we want to do is co-create this with everybody who joins. I have some specific ideas already, and one of them is like community offerings. So something like what you're saying, where you could offer that into this space. But I wanted to just present some of the ideas I've been having with Lena. And then we could talk about other ideas that people have in this opening circle and just develop it emergently as we go. So that's the idea for now. And I'll talk about the ideas I've had and you could bring this in MIDI, and I'm sure others will have some thought ideas too. So
I know I would definitely endorse Mitty's Gene Keys readings. They're very deep and insightful.
Beautiful. Well, I can at least come for the first half hour. I can't stay long, but that's enough for dipping feet in. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mitty. Anyone else have questions or comments that you'd like to add? Benji.
Yeah, I have something that's just emerged in the chat between Brad and myself. We are, so in the Colorado River Basin, we're like, what, 5 or 6 different bioregions who are coming together in conversation. And Brad just mentioned that he wants to fill the role of connector. He would love to bring more community leadership from Grand Junction to weave with what's already emerging. And he said that one of the things that would be really valuable is a really short YouTube video that he could share into his community as a means to reveal those people outside of course, the process of bioregional activation, which does it so well. But I'm wondering if there's anything like that.
well, one thing I'll say, Benji, is that's going to be one of the focuses in this pre-activation supports design lab as we're developing sort of, as you had written in one of your emails, the presentation of everything.
Right.
Kind of a thing, the developing the story part, and part of that would be creating a video, a video like that people can use to share. So I think that's coming soon.
Right. And mega
Well,
burn from Grace.
That's pretty true. Yeah.
Mega burn.
I think Grace's point is that I probably shouldn't be in that video.
Yeah.
I think you did one daily check-in that was less than 3 minutes.
We can edit, we can edit. So yeah.
She can edit. Mm.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I
well,
just think it's really great. It's really happening. Like, we're really doing this. These components are so critical for things to actually get going in a good way. And I feel a lot of hope when I'm like here staring at my son and this conversation's happening. I'm like, wow, oh my God, this is good.
well, Chris, I was just thinking of what you suggested. I don't know how many of you have seen it yet, but Chris was like, hey, would anyone like to live stream their local community events so that people in other places could attend them? Because where Chris is in Superior, in Superior, Arizona, they have a community center and they have a lot of events. And this really cool guy named Mushroom Mike, you can't tell by his name how cool he is, just gave a talk about building soils, and they live stream these. So he's like, we could post it in the design school, and design school members could attend remotely and learn about what's happening in our community. Who else would like to do that? And by the way, Chris, there's this really cool thing that Pro Social World has been doing in Latin America, which is teaching people how to create participatory videos with their iPhones. There's a very simple interview structure that allows community members to map their own community stories in service to community development. And like kids can do it. And like you can get like elementary school kids with an iPhone to make a little 3 or 4 minute video, send it to someone else, and they have these videos that create participatory governance. It's really cool stuff. It's a methodology developed in Mexico and applied in about 50 countries. And so they're going to be doing that with people in Latin America, but you could see how naturally that lends itself to us doing participatory teach-ins into each other's landscapes with live streaming, with Zoom sessions, with smartphones, with all kinds of cool stuff. So hell yeah, more of that. Any other comments or questions that people have? Benji?
Just really briefly to follow on the idea of live streaming workshops. Our initial effort to broadcast it to the design school was within the Colorado River Basin collection. Sorry, space. Shoot. I was thinking, I was trying to think of all the people in the design school who have a lot of visibility into their communities and might be aware of workshops coming up. And a lot of those people are outside of the Colorado River Basin. I wonder if there's another way that we can sort of broadcast this effort.
Yeah, we could Could put it in school happenings and I could email about it. If we want,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and we don't specifically have to use the live streaming functionality of Mighty Networks, which we've already learned is kind of crappy. Bad audio, bad video resolution, and like for everyone who doesn't know, I tried to do a live stream daily check-in and then I deleted it and recorded it on my computer because the video quality was so bad. And so it's less that, it's more like if you're doing, you could just set up a Zoom room.
Mhm.
Like I could see in Superior, they just have a laptop with a Zoom and the Zoom is watching. And then you can have someone who just sits at that computer and fields the questions to the speaker. So it doesn't have to be live stream TM. It's just live streaming in some form. It's digital, virtual participation. And so, and I love what Grace has already said that, for those of you who don't know, Grace hosts this amazing course. And the best part of it is the quality of people who come. And she just gathers amazing people. And so to gather amazing people who then would want to do things is like, to weave them into these landscape processes where it actually makes sense. This is the kind of stuff we want to all be thinking about, but it needs to actually be coherent. So the design school needs to be structured in a way that we would actually want that, like Grace would want that to be in the school because she'd want the school to, it's like if the school was extractive or too top down or something, she wouldn't want that. And that would be smart, to not want that. So we all should be thinking in this way of how do we make the design school as coherent as possible with other things that are outside of it so that we dissolve the outside, not to make everything part of the design school, but just that the boundaries don't stop us from collaborating where we know we need to. That's all. So yeah. Generally, how are you all feeling about this? Maybe that's a prompt for a next round. Big thumbs up from Chris, from
We're
Brad.
gonna break Mighty Network.
Yeah.
We're
Penny's
gonna have to
trying.
I'm gonna bring in some of my people with some computer stuff behind them so that by the time we break the Mighty Network, we'll have a backup plan.
Yeah.
Well, along those lines, one of the questions that I've gotten ever since the beginning of Earth Regenerators was, why aren't you guys on Hilo? And routinely that would come up. And I'm like, well, I'm friends with the people that created Hilo. They're my friends. I'm not actively collaborating with them at the moment. But now, right now, I'm thinking I should go reach out to Claire Politano. She's my old friend. I should go talk to her. Not because we're going to weave platforms, but because what we're doing and what they're doing is so aligned. How do we support each other? And similarly, there's like Salmon Nation, who convened a bunch of people and now projects to get funded with this Edgewalker Prize. That's a lot of organizing that's happened. And that's connected with the work Ben Roberts is doing and the Regenerative Communities Network, which is also connected with R 3.0 and their collaborative funding and governance ecosystems coming out of a blueprint they've done. And it's like, come on, we got to get all this stuff into the same ecosystem. Not the same platform, but the same ecosystem. And that's where that high level coherence is so needed and really, really feels possible. I think for the first time. It really feels possible. And it feels possible because, not because of technology, but because of the mindset of leadership that I'm seeing everywhere. Like Grace saying, could I just bring my students into the design school? That's a leader with a mindset of leadership. I'm seeing mindsets of leadership right now that are really different. And I'm seeing it everywhere. So let's all be looking for that. How is the leadership changing within the regenerative movement? Are there any other comments or questions people would like to offer into the space? There's no pressure. Brad.
Joe, yeah, I just wanted to say, I think you do an amazing job of reading the room and, tailoring your presentation to the audience. And so I guess what I'm alluding to is when I say I feel really safe to be in this collapse aware group, you all get what I mean, but that kind of statement can scare other people away. And those people might be people that we want in because they have great stories to tell and they have a lot to add. So yeah, like how do you balance being authentic with bringing people in wherever they're ready to come in?
I mean, my initial answer to that would be, I think the most powerful way that people are going to enter into this space is because of their love of the place where they are. And that will be like the referral is like, you know, Chad's here and he loves where he lives in Michigan and he's talking to a friend that's in his community and they're like, wow, you're organizing something in Michigan. I want to be part of that. Or, you know, I'm from Lake Michigan over on the Chicago side or on the Wisconsin side, and there's something starting to happen. And so I actually think a lot of it is going to be that way, which is just very broadly and generally human. And the collapse conversation is not the dominant tone of this space. It's just like a common sense backdrop of this space. We're not afraid to say it. You know, we don't hesitate to say it, but we don't like the way Deep Adaptation Forum would sort of be, it's sort of in your face. You know, like you can't get away from the collapse conversation in that space. Here, someone could come into the space and just be all about story of place on the western slopes of Colorado, and occasionally hear something about collapse. And I think that that's really healthy, to just have a space that's inclusive in that way. So my sense is it's something like that. Grace, please.
Yeah, just to that question, my workshop actually walks people kind of through, like, as far as they're willing to go in the collapse conversation. And I could imagine other learning journeys being able to do that. And sometimes I get to the end of my talk, and I like the end of the 6 weeks, and I realize like there's sure like the key concepts that I want people to understand about the monetary system they haven't gotten. Like they can't unbrainwash themselves. I haven't been able to break their thinking. But even so, people feel quite welcome, and I think that's what Joe is alluding to. Like you might be like, these people are a little bit more wild out than we are, but you know, we're on the same track anyway. It's about what you do together, not necessarily what you believe in many ways.
Yeah, I would say maybe there are identity forming beliefs that are deep in our worldviews, and those will create all kinds of schisms between people. But then there are beliefs like, I believe I'm a fair person, even though I always take more than my share of dessert, you know, where we have these beliefs that really are not that important, but you might characterize them as beliefs. And I think in the pro-socialness of a context where people identify with each other, like for example, I have friends back in Missouri who are pretty racist, but they're still my friends. And I just basically poke fun at them for being racist. Like, you're being a dumb racist right now. And it's because my beliefs aren't the same as theirs, but we share a commonality that's something else. And I think all of us who grew up in small towns that are open-minded people, we all had to learn that skill set. And there's a similar version of flexibility that I think Grace was alluding to there. Claire.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed a good chunk of the first part of the discussion. But what I was hearing from you, Grace, and it's something I'm really sort of struggling with, but I really want to just bring it up here, is the big difference between when you're learning something together and it's not in a real life context on the ground. I'm having a really hard time with the conversations and then not having the same people that are on the ground part of the learning, because it's so different and it manifests so differently and you learn so differently. Like you can kind of, it becomes real in a way that just conceptually it just can't. So I just wanted to bring that in.
Yeah, and I'd love to jump in really quickly before Benji. Brad's son has his hand up, I think, and wants to say something maybe. So I just wanted to invite him in. And hi, what's your name?
I'm Ali, and I would like to show some of my gems.
Whoa. Okay, let me spotlight you so everyone can see it better. Whoa, is that quartz?
Wow.
Think.
Whoa.
Super cool.
Very nice
Ooh,
color.
I
You've
like
got
that.
some good
Ooh.
ones.
A tiger's eye? Oh, man.
Ooh.
Ooh.
I feel like this is something like a blue tiger's eye or something.
Mhm.
Kind of has that vibe.
Yeah, I think you're right. Heck yeah. Bring on the cool rocks. You got more? How many
Wow,
rocks do you
man.
have?
Cool, man.
Ooh, I
Oh
like that
man, I
one.
think I just saw hematite.
Yeah.
They're gonna wrap up. So it's a time.
Wow. Hey, my friend,
Okay.
thank you for sharing these. I gotta go myself, but it's a pleasure. Thank you. I'm feeling jazzed up. Aho. Peace.
Oh, thank you for sharing those gems, and thank you, Chris. And Benji, back
Yeah,
to
that
you.
really rocks.
That rocks. That came through crystal clear, Grace. Oh my
How funny.
God. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't structure my jokes that way. Benji, stop, save us, save us.
No, man, I don't know if I'm gonna save us. That was a moment of levity, and I was gonna go back to collapse real quick. There's just something that I wanna name that I feel like is really important, because I think, yes, it's very important for us to. I loved how you framed it, Joe. Like, collapse is sort of in the background. It's like it's a shared understanding, and we want to be able to invite others in who might not share that. The transformative experience of learning about it and going through whatever particular circumstance in our life that gets us to the other side, whatever process that is for us. I'm really excited for Penny's Inner Spaces to open up, because this conversation is going to find a home there. It's really important. But the thing that I wanted to name is that when we, as I personally went through the experience of like becoming collapse aware and seeing like the full extent that the future is really precarious, I'll just put it that way. As I got through that, it became part of my identity. And then that set a new standard for me for what I felt must happen. And so I think it's a really important thing for us to identify as people who see collapse, because it will define our standards. I think that without that, we too easily, throw in the towel when the going gets tough and things like that. We revert to our comforts. Brad, you were the one who said you were addicted to civilization. That was a pretty funny joke. But yeah, we fall into those same compulsions based on that addiction. So that's all I wanted to say. I think it's a really big deal. But yes, let's be welcoming at the same time.
Yeah. Well, maybe to pull us into a close, so we don't have to stay on here for like an hour and a half. We can end now. This is a good spot for ending today. Is that we're going to keep doing these design school updates every 2 weeks, because we anticipate that there will be a lot of changes, and that every 2 weeks we'll need to give an update. And it's actually quite a lot of work for me to create these presentations, not because it's hard to put the slides together, but it's holding the coherence of what is emerging and communicating it without being overwhelming or confusing. That's a lot of work. But the benefit of that is that it actually creates collective sense making. I'm making sense better, and so are we all. And so I think it's gonna be really powerful when we have this leadership council, because there were things that were starting to happen in the last couple of weeks that could be described as conflicts. But what we saw instead was they weren't conflicts, they were just incoherence because of the lack of containers and lack of clear structures. I was like, well, how do we talk about where things move forward when someone in one bioregion is really doing something with a lot of passion and they want to bring it to the other bioregions, but we don't know what the different bioregions are doing. And so we just need a coherent space for that to be socially recognized with some coherent leadership. And so I think this is a really powerful thing for all of us, is that we're going to keep moving into new kinds of incoherence and then creating the coherence in those spaces. And that this is going to be a skill set for all of us. I think all of us on this call right now have experience with this. So this maybe isn't a new concept, but we just have to keep getting better and better at it, and get better and better at doing it together. And Like I'm feeling really lucky for some of the difficult conflicts I went through earlier this year and the various ways that we did things that did or didn't work, but how much we learned about how to create the containers and the structures. And I mean emergently and dynamically to create them on the fly. And so if we're going to start moving large amounts of money, which I think we actually are going to do, it's going to be because we're capable of working together around complex tasks. And like the guy I talked to yesterday, when the guy from Cisco Foundation, and this is maybe an indicator, it was like April of last year. So it's been just a little over a year. He came up with the idea. He'd been at the Cisco Foundation for over 20 years and had done lots of corporate philanthropy work, and they hadn't done anything on climate change. And he went to them and proposed $30 million. And they only had 2 questions for him at the end of his presentation. The first question was, why did you only ask for 30 million? Do you think that's enough? And then the second question was, what would you do with 500 million? And he left the meeting with 100 million. More than 3 times what he was asking for. Now, what this tells me, think of the kinds of people who have wealth behind Cisco. Now, for those of you who don't know, Cisco is a technology company, which means the people behind it are really smart people. They're systems thinkers. And if they say 30 million ain't enough, you're not asking for enough. And they were ready to give 100 million. What this tells me is that the people who have money that are paying attention to what's going on want to put it into motion. They want to. And they need trusted people who can bring it to the places where it can make a difference. And they need people who can make a difference, which is we need to organize around tapestries of projects, organize those landscapes, all this stuff we're talking about, so that we can mobilize large amounts of money. It took us 3 years in Barichara to get to the point where we could create a 5-year budget that was about $1.5 million, built on trust and collaboration within existing real-world relationships, with existing projects, with real budgets allocated to each of them. It took us 3 years to get there. So we haven't asked anyone for $1.5 million yet, but we created a budget. And it's because we did the 3 years of building trust and doing things together and 3 rounds of moving money into those projects. And so this is where bringing money into landscapes is going to be how we build that capacity in every landscape. And so that's why I think this work that we're doing now of sense making collectively, building complexity, holding greater complexity, that's why it's going to just be so important. And so I just wanted to name that. That's a big part of this work. And one of the things I want to do is for every landscape where we have committed people on the ground, like Jonathan and Victoria on this call, they're looking for money for setting up a learning center on a piece of land where the person with the land wants to donate it in the right structure. Well, that's a perfect opportunity to practice using money. Who's going to bring money to the Finger Lakes, right? It's like we practice in the real world. That's the key. And so, so I just want to name it with that level of concreteness, that it's like we would not be able to move money into Genesee Finger Lakes until Jonathan and Victoria and their team, whatever that means, in this case with this landowner, would be ready to say what they need and would be ready to implement it. And so we're going to need seed funding to help landscape teams to get to that place, because many of them aren't there. And they'll, so they'll need some help. And so this is going to be a lot of the work, is this kind of building our relationships, building our capacities. With the Design School Fund, we can move small amounts of money. Here's $2,000, here's $500, but maybe it's not enough to say transform something in the community. Maybe they need $50,000 or $100. Depends on the landscape. It's always going to be small amounts of money in the beginning, but small relative to the scale that they're working on. For a watershed, $100,000 is small. For a community dialogue around a learning center, maybe $5,000 is small. It depends. But this is the kind of work we want to move into in the next year, and we want to learn by doing as much as possible. So that's why we're very intentionally creating these structures, and why we're so excited to have the funding we have. When we were given this funding, I asked for $300,000. I wrote 3 paragraphs in 4 minutes. And the next day we had the money, but they said, we're going to give you 150,000 in the first year, but we're not going to give you 150,000 in the second year. Even though you've got that guaranteed, I think you will need more, but let's wait till the end of the first year to decide the amount. That's the kind of funder we're working with. And so it's completely based in trust. And so we all need to be able to work in this way together. And that's another reason why sharing everything we can about what we're doing in these updates is going to be so important. So with that said, hopefully you can see ways to plug in with the structures we're creating. We will be rolling out the Leadership Council this week and starting to prototype it and create some basic frameworks for governance so that we can practice governance together. And then we're gonna roll that out in various iterations. And you know, I find that the best way to design governance is to govern. Is to actually practice. So here we go. We have some really capable people who know a lot about governance in our community. So as we're stumbling, they will definitely give us pointers. Grace would be like, you didn't think of this. Yeah, that sort of stuff will be happening. And that's part of the reason we're building in the open. Yeah, to be continued. Thank you, everyone. And onward we go. So bye-bye for now.